Because in order to do something impossible, someone has come along and say, I'm going to test the impossibility of this feat. And then once they prove that what was once thought to be impossible is in fact possible, everyone subsequent to that gets to take on the task of knowing that it's possible. And when the human brain can do a thing, knowing that it's possible, it becomes infinitely more likely that they will be able to successfully do that thing. Welcome back to the Therapist React series. If this is your first time here, this is where I cover things going on in the news and in pop culture to highlight the psychological aspects of these stories so that we can have improved mental health. And I saw a story recently that was so touching, but also had an incredibly valuable lesson. It's about a young man, a 13-year-old kid named Willis Gibson. Now, if you don't know that name, Willis Gibson was just a typical, normal 13-year-old, except for one thing. He was the one that was delusional enough to change the world. The world is often changed by the delusional people who refuse to accept reality as it was presented to them. And this young 13-year-old boy was one of those people that refused to accept reality as it was presented to them, and then ultimately created massive change. Now, here's what happened. 40 years ago, there was a video game created called Tetris. Most of us have played it. It's a game about putting blocks in spaces. The blocks come down from above the screen and you have to kind of manipulate things. So they go in the empty spaces and then it eliminates things and you just keep going. And every single level is faster than the level before. They did a gaming expo about 25 years ago. So the game had been around at this point about 10 or 15 years. And the creators of the game said it was impossible for a human being to defeat. Meaning, no matter what you did, you'd go to the next level where the things were faster, and there was never going to be a human being who could get to the level that would be the last level. And in comes Willis Gibson, who refuses to accept that reality and had his heart set on beating this game. And he ultimately did. He beat Tetris. He got to a point where Tetris froze because he had gone to so many levels, there was no more levels to get to. A place that was once thought to be impossible by human beings. The CEO of Tetris, a woman by the name of Maya Rogers, sent a congratulations to this young boy, congratulating him on accomplishing this feat that they once thought was impossible and igniting the Tetris community to dream even bigger. But he did something more than that. Now think about this for a second, and here's the lesson in this story. No one had beaten this game, ever, not once, in 40 years. The people who created the game thought it was impossible for a human being to do. Now, they had created computer systems that could beat the game, but they thought it was an impossibility for a living, breathing, actual human to do. And then this boy does it. And here's where it gets really fascinating psychologically. Once it was announced that he did it, there was a lot of news about it. The CEO of Tetris reached out to him and Tetris created a press release. Once this boy did it and that news went out, the next day, someone else did it. 2 days later, someone else did it. And in the subsequent few days, it had happened multiple times. Why? Why for 40 years did no one do it? And then in comes Willis Gibson and he does it. And then the second time it happened was literally the next day. And then it happens again. And again, it's now happened multiple times. Why is that? Because the people who did it subsequent to Willis Gibson did it with the belief that it was possible. That's why I referred to Willis Gibson as that delusional world changer who refused to accept the world as it was presented to them. Because in order to do something impossible, someone has come along and say, I'm going to test the impossibility of this feat. And then once they prove that what was once thought to be impossible is in fact possible, everyone subsequent to that gets to take on the task of knowing that it's possible. And when the human brain can do a thing, knowing that it's possible, it becomes infinitely more likely that they will be able to successfully do that thing. A really good example of this is the 4-minute mile. Scientists once believed that the human body could not move fast enough to run a mile in 4 minutes. The human being couldn't metabolize oxygen and turn it into energy quickly enough to run a mile in 4 minutes. And then here comes this man, Roger Bannister, who was the delusional man who wanted to test the reality that was presented to him. Is it in fact reality? And he set out to run a mile in less than 4 minutes. And he failed. And he failed. And he failed. But one of these failures, he got so close that it convinced him it was possible. And then ultimately he succeeded. And in the years since, it had never happened in human history before. In fact, every credible scientist would have told you at that time that it's impossible. And then he did it. In the subsequent years, over 20,000 people have run a mile in less than 4 minutes. The only difference between those people prior to Roger Bannister and the people post Roger Bannister is the people post Roger Bannister endeavored on the task knowing that it was possible. It's an incredible phenomenon. And the reason I'm sharing it with you right now, some of you are pursuing things that you thought were once impossible. Creating successful businesses, losing weight, or getting a degree, or overcoming a challenge or obstacle, or whatever it might be. You first have to convince yourself that it's possible. And then once you do that, you are drastically impacting the likelihood that you will succeed. Simply by convincing yourself it's possible. You are monumentally making it more likely that you will succeed and accomplish your aim. That is the lesson here. And I'm so grateful that there are 13-year-olds like Willis Gibson to remind us how impossible can be possible. I genuinely think they're here to remind us that things that we once thought we couldn't do, we could. They're here to remind us that being delusionally optimistic and believing in yourself is an amazing asset. And when we can take that on, remind ourselves that you can accomplish anything, it makes the world such a better, more beautiful, more fruitful place. So as you work on whatever it is you're working on in your life, as you're working to get through whatever it is you're working to get through, first convince yourself that it's possible, and you'll be much more likely to do it. That's the lesson here. So thank you for watching. If you like this video, please leave a comment. I would love to hear what you thought of this story. So comment below this video. Please hit that like button, and please share it with someone in your life that matters to you by hitting that share button. And also subscribe to this channel just by hitting the subscribe button, and then hit the bell so you get notified each and every time we release a video in the Therapist React series. Thank you so much for being here. I love you guys, and I can't wait to see you in the next video.